We've had a lot of fun with Pardo over the years, both with its slick open day boats, which is pretty famous, and also with the performance oriented GT line. But we're here in Palma today to witness the launch of a new Pardo, and it's not just any Pardo. At 72 feet, this is the new flagship of the Pardo Endurance fleet. Now, we tested the Pardo GT75, that's the flagship of the entire fleet, last year, and we liked it a great deal. And when you look at this new Endurance 72, you'd say that there are definitely aesthetic similarities, but the clue's in the name. The GT75 is about performance as much as anything, and certainly about outdoor spaces. This Endurance 72, well, it's about long-range cruising. It's designed to be a proper cruising boat. So one of the major changes you'll see here is on the lower deck. We won't see it quite yet, of course, until we get down there, but this is a fixed lower deck in stark contrast to the GT75, where you have 2, 3 or 4 cabins. Well, down here we've got 4 cabins, 5 bathrooms and a crew cabin up in the bow, and that is the standard layout. There are no options for that. Galley up top, of course. We also have, as you'll see, and this is perfectly evident even from here, we've got a much larger wheelhouse, and that of course limits the amount of outdoor space we have relative to that GT75. But of course that's rescued in part by the fact that we also have a flybridge, something the GT75 doesn't have, and we also have enormous, absolutely enormous drop-down terraces on both sides, as we'll see in a second. But if we make our way towards the boat, we'll start, as we usually do, at the back end. I'll just kick my shoes off and jump onto the passerelle, because this boat, well, it's 3 feet shorter and a foot narrower in the beam than the GT75, and as I say, it's got a larger wheelhouse, and in terms of the outdoor spaces, it's the back end that suffers the hit for that the most. So what we have here at the lower level is a high-low platform, and beneath this sunbed here, which juts out over that space, we have a really enormous tender garage, big enough for a 4-metre tender to slide in and out. At the moment it's used entirely for the stowage of bulky gear like our fenders, but it's a cavernous space, no doubt about that. And if we step up into the cockpit itself, you'll see that the aft bench uses backrests that can drop into that space. You can expand that sunbed, make it a little bit larger. What we also have here is a high-low table with freestanding furniture, and we'll be saying that a lot as we walk around this boat. Freestanding furniture does seem to be the order of the day. That does of course limit storage possibilities, because you don't have the bases for the furniture built into the boat, but it does improve versatility in terms of making it very easy for you to rig this deck and the flybridge, and to a degree the saloon, as you would like. Now, what else we have in here? You'll see the flybridge juts a good way aft, and we've got an additional electrically operated sunshade just to extend out over that sunbed should you want it. If we move forward and look on the starboard side, we've got a little third helm there. Very handy for bringing the boat alongside, of course, particularly so if you're bringing it stern to in a Mediterranean marina. And these are the terraces I was talking about, identical on both sides, of course. They go all the way from these transom steps right the way forward, past the back end of the superstructure, past these sliding doors, and we'll talk more about those in a bit, all the way to this step. And I reckon they must encompass about 45% of the overall length, so they are absolutely vast. Those terraces are, of course, optional. You'd certainly look to take them though. It really transforms the usability of this boat. But as we're walking around this boat, it's worth noting that pretty much anything you see that is remotely posh or premium looking is probably an optional extra, because it goes from 3.7 million euros plus tax as a base package right up to this test boat, which comes in at €6 million plus tax. So there's certainly plenty of opportunity to spec it up. And they spec'd it up here beneath the seating with a couple of fridges. We also spec'd it up in the form of that third helm, as we've already seen. And they spec'd it up beneath the deck here as well, in the engine bay, because as standard it comes with IPS 1050s for a combined total of 1600 horsepower. And what we have here is the top rated 1350s for a combined total of 2000 horsepower. But it is, of course, again illustrative of this boat's purpose, that the GT75 comes with a triple rig of 1350s, and the maximum here is just a pair. For speed, they tell me, around about 26 knots. And as we move up to the bow, up that one step, past the leading edge of the wheelhouse, well, the bow space, that seems pretty generous. Generous in terms of its length and in terms of its beam, and it's been very well used. So we've got a really expansive forward-facing bench built into the leading edge of that moulding. There's space under there, as you can see, for life rafts, bits and bobs, another couple of fridges there. That faces across to this central unit. Now that is basically a sunbed, excuse me, which comes with weighted backrests that you can shift wherever you like, which makes it particularly versatile. And it's all the more versatile because this sunbed, this island sunbed, sits in the centre between that aft bench and an additional forward bench. So there's plenty of flexibility in what you can do with it. And there's plenty of storage under here too. Lots and lots of space for your bits and bobs, as well as for the uprights for your sunshade up here. And the way it's fitted out is quite pleasant too. We've got natural teak. There's natural teak all over this boat. Little trays for your knickknacks, your nibbles and your drinks. We've also got a stereo remote over there on the port side. And as we move to the forepeak, well, here's the access point to the crew cabin, which comprises a bunk on the starboard side, a washer dryer in the centre, and the ensuite facilities on the port side. There's decent headroom down there, decent space. The ladder to access it is a little bit steep and awkward. A well-placed grab rail would help with that. But actually light is decent in there as well, thanks to a couple of little windows just built into the leading edge of that central moulding. But let's make our way back aft. Again, lots of lovely teak everywhere you look. Beautiful steelwork too. Head past the skipper's side door on the port side here, down another step, past the port terrace, which is, as I say, equally enormous. And you'll see as we do so, we got a little bit of protection from that flybridge up top. It kind of flares out at the aft end, almost in the style of a trawler yacht. And when we get back into the cockpit and head up to that flybridge, well, as you can see, it's a decent gradient of steps, not too steep, but I'd like to see a grab rail out here on the port side as well, just to give you an extra sense of security as you're climbing up here in swells. And when we get to the flybridge itself, well, this is a really, really good size. As I say, it extends a decent way aft above that cockpit. And as I've also intimated, it's all about the freestanding furniture in here. This L-shaped seating zone in the centre. Elegant, quite low slung as you want it to be on the flybridge. Big enough, I'd say, for 6 people sitting around that table. But as I say, it's all freestanding, and so too are these loungers in the back end. But they're not your average loungers, I have to say. They're beautifully done. Again, lots of teak, nice raw teak. Little trays for your bits and bobs. But if you don't like that, of course, there are other things you can do with it. And what we have here on this particular flybridge is canvas over the top of us, but you can spec this boat with a hardtop should you want. And this is optional. This is our wet bar. If I move these out of the way, you'll see we've got an electric hob there. We've got an additional hot plate, I think, under this section, if I can just shift that out of the way. And over here to my right hand side, we've got a good size of sink there as well. I had a look and I can't actually find anywhere to put these little trays when they're not in use, which I would find faintly aggravating. But what we do have underneath that is an ice maker and a fridge and a little bit of storage under there. once again, it's been extremely generous with the teak. It's a nicely built unit, that. And it's well placed for the guys over at this port dinette. And if we move slightly forward, well, I like the way they've arranged the helm as well. There's space for two here very easily. Again, it's lined with natural teak over on the side there. Got some armrests, some cup holders, little trays for your bits and bobs. A couple of big MFDs there on the main tier of the dash. And if I pop myself in position, you see you can't actually see your own bow from the sitting position because of that raised bank of MFDs. But from the standing position, you see plenty of that. And the wheel is adjustable, so that's quite easy. And if I just change hands with the camera, you see I can reach down to the throttles without actually stooping, bending my back, risking any injury. So it's quite a comfy spot for stand-up helming. We got the joystick as well, the thruster, and the throttles, everything you need. Another tray, and companion seating, which I reckon is big enough for 3 people. So combine that with your twin helm, and there's easily space here for 5 to keep each other company on a long passage. But what we want to do, of course, is get downstairs, pop into that saloon and see what that generously sized wheelhouse delivers. And here we are. As you can see, it encompasses a pretty good length, and it's quite simply arranged. We got a galley on the port side here, a dining station to starboard, C-shaped dinette further forward opposite a kind of compact companion seat over there on the port side, and the helm station over on the port side there. Now our Pardo man has just very graciously exited by the skipper's side door to avoid the camera, so we've got this place to ourselves now. And what you'll notice is that we've got sliding doors everywhere. So basically the idea here from Pardo is that inside and outside should commune with one another very naturally, and they should also integrate very well with the sea. So in addition to these fold down terraces, you can open these aft doors wide up. You can slide these side doors wide open. When you drop the terraces, your dining station feels essentially like it's outdoors. It's a single level deck, as you can see, all the way through, so that helps with that. Headroom is particularly generous too, particularly for a flybridge cruiser. We've been out on the water, we've used these terraces, we've taken a look at this dining station and the way the spaces integrate, and it really is very effective indeed. Over on the port side, well, we've got a nice big one-piece window that slides down into that zone. We can't actually open that today because, well, I don't know why, but they've told us not to, so we shan't. And if we look out there, well, there's our port terrace. So you get a view of it, and presumably you could just pop a couple of stools out there and use it as a bar, but it doesn't actually have any kind of inside-outside dedicated bar feature, and I find that slightly surprising from Pardo, given the principles behind this design. But what we have at the galley is an oven and a 4-ring hob up top, a really good size of sink, a decent bit of work surface, and a little cooler for your bottle of wine. We've also got, I think, the dishwasher in here, yeah, and a good size of fridge. I'm being very delicate because that again says do not open. A good size of fridge, the freezer down below, and additional storage in here. A good size of pantry. You can see the angle of the steps as they lead up to the flybridge. It's a good use of space there. But if we head further forward, what you'll also notice, this being a proper cruising boat, is the fact that we have not one but a pair of staircases. One here on the port side amidships that leads down to the owner's cabin, the VIP cabin and the dayheads, and one further forward that leads down to a pair of ensuite twin cabins. We'll get to those in a moment. I think you're likely to be quite impressed. But up here in the forward part, well, again, just like up on the flybridge, we got the helm on the port side, some companion seating on the starboard side. That is quite low slung. And if we look up, you'll see that the windows are relatively shallow on both sides. So if I take a seat, this is my eye line, you don't actually see the horizon. If you want big views, you need to head aft and use the back end of this saloon. Up here, this lounge seating is just a little too low to get proper views through those relatively shallow windows, as I say. We do have a little seat opposite this one, makes it extra sociable, plus a little cabinet here and a TV that lifts out of that section on the port side. And I think that's a really good spot to put it. Quite often, these TVs make no great deal of sense. But on this, given that most of this seating faces inboard, there's a very natural place for it, particularly given that it's above a stairwell, so it's unlikely to be obstructed by people. But before we head down to the owner's cabin and the VIP, let's just head forward past this rather stylish helm, down this central companionway, past the electrics panel as well, to the two twins. As I say, they're completely identical. What we're immediately faced with here is what appears to be a cabinet, but it's not that. It actually just generates a bit of extra volume in both cabins. Well, let's take a look at the starboard cabin. And what we see is a couple of beds of very decent size, plenty of headroom as well. If I turn the camera around, you'll see that really is quite impressive. And while we're up here at a high level, it's worth noticing this as well, a high level outlet for your air conditioning unit, nice and long, horizontal. It means that it gives you kind of ambient wafts of cool air rather than cold spots and hot spots, and it tends to be a bit quieter too, so that makes loads of sense. We've also got a little unit between the beds for storage, very modest storage, but we also have storage beneath the beds themselves. There's not sufficient space here to give you slide out drawers or anything like that, so you have to lift the mattresses and get under the panels this way. We also have the light switches, power points, thermostat and reading lights there. And the fit out is rather pleasant too. I like these windows as well. Good depth, good length. An opening porthole giving us lots of lovely ventilation here today. But I do notice that when I sit down on the bed, well, my eye level is too low to see the horizon. I think it's a bit of a shame. And more peculiar still, actually, the unit at the bed head here, this panel, extends a little way aft and blocks your view of that window and your light from bed. So I don't really understand that at all. If it were me, I'd look to raise these beds a little to give you a decent view, and I'd eradicate this section of panel because I just don't see any purpose to it at all. What we do have though is some decent high level storage there, a hanging locker here. As I say, the port cabin is identical, and ensuite facilities, toilet there on the aft bulkhead, sink unit and storage outboard with a mirror and another window with an opening porthole. I find this sort of slightly beigey flesh tone pink colour a bit strange, but there are plenty of options as regards the styling and the finish, and a good size of shower there with a rain shower up top with a built-in light. So it's a pretty good cabin, given it's the one of the two smallest here on this boat. There is the port cabin, as I say, completely identical. But we'll head aft now, and we'll use that midship staircase on the port side and head down to the owner's cabin. As we do so, we take a 180-degree turn, head inboard, and this is access to the owner's cabin. This is access to the VIP cabin. They neighbour one another, and outboard on the port side we have the day heads. Now, on the face of it, I looked at that, thought the day heads next to the owner's cabin seems a bit strange, but actually this staircase puts it in the perfect position for easy access from the cockpit, from the saloon and from that flybridge. So we'll do that first and save the owner's cabin for last. Nip in here, it's the same kind of fit out as we see in the en-suites further forward. Again, a big window, again one of these slightly peculiar sinks. Decent size, does everything you need it to do. And again, actually, while I'm here, I'll spin the camera around and show you just how good the headroom is. You could be 6'5", 6'6" and not really worry here. Across the corridor we have the VIP cabin. Bed facing inboard. Little units at either side of the bed. A TV built into the bulkhead there, so you can watch it quite comfortably without leaving the comfort of your bed, and storage built into this bulkhead, which is quite neatly done. Again, there we go. I've got to close that one before I close that one. Quite robust catches. As I say, that's not necessarily a problem at all. On the contrary, it can be quite a useful thing. More storage, that's really deep, that, here with automatic LEDs. And the ensuite facilities. Precisely what you'd expect. A little bit of storage, a bit of a mirror, a small window, the toilet, and a decent size of shower. Not huge for a VIP. No seat in there or anything like that. But you could just about squeeze 2 people in, and again, you get a rain shower. But of course, what we really want to see on a boat like this is the owner's cabin. So we'll nip out of here and head aft. As you enter the owner's cabin, the first thing you see is a big bank of storage, very useful for a cruiser of this kind. And we actually have to walk around another couple of angles to get into the main body of the cabin itself, which I quite like. It just adds a bit of interest. It's much more usable, more practical than just open space. Impressive though open space can sometimes be. And this is quite a handy little unit actually. If I slide out this little bench seat, you'll see that it's basically a dresser at the foot of your bed with a built-in mirror, and behind that a much larger mirror that actually does fool you into thinking that this cabin is significantly larger than it is. Now, the bed itself is a good size and it's bang in the centre of this central space. We also have a little settee on the starboard side. It is small, but it's perfectly big enough for 2, and that of course is perfectly adequate. Additional storage here and another stereo remote. Lots more of these air conditioning vents. And if we head over to the port side, well, another very large storage unit, and behind that, we've seen this before, his and hers bathrooms with what I would assume is glass doors, yeah. So you can keep that light flowing from the port side, you're not blocking it off, creating a fixed, impenetrable bulkhead. It feels very open, it's quite an attractive way to do it. So his and hers sinks, and the facilities, the toilet and the shower, are split fore and aft, which is a much more civilised way to go cruising with your partner. The helm station on this new Endurance 72 is very much pared back. Digital switching, as you would expect, and a pair of huge 24-inch MFDs right here on the main tier of the dash, and that uses every spare inch of space. But it's still a very slick, pared back feeling helm, as you'd expect from Pardo. Feels kind of boutiquey, very high-end, very premium. As I say though, there's not a great deal to look at apart from the things I've just described. A little MFD remote next to your throttles, which is a handy little touch. And I've got to say, the bench seat here is almost big enough for 2 people, because the wheels bang slap in the centre of this. I can only imagine that it's designed specifically for 1. So it's very generous indeed. And we actually got a little bit of companion seating as well over on the starboard side here. It's not sufficiently raised that the people over there are going to see out the front when you're underway, but it's certainly enough to keep the skipper company if you're forced inside on a passage. Now, I'll just pop her into tick over and spin around into the seas. We don't have much in the way of a sea state to play with here today, and we're not going to have a lot of pace to play with either, because this, as I say, is very much a cruising machine, not a performance machine. To put it in perspective, the GT75 that we tested last year, and that's a comparable scale of boat, similar weight, around about 50 tonnes. That's got triple IPS 1350s, this just has a pair, and that's the top rated option on this particular boat. As standard it comes with 1050, so twin 800 horsepower units, and here we've got the uprated 1350s for a total of 2000 horsepower. So given that this is not a performance boat, given that this is a cruising machine, well, what do you want when you get underway? Well, you want softness, and we get that. We certainly get that on a day like today because we don't have very challenging seas, but you also want refinement, and we certainly get that as well. We've already had a little play, and right up to the top end we're staying round about the mid-60s in terms of decibels, and at the ideal cruising speed, they call it the eco speed, around about 10 to 12 knots, we're looking at between 53 and 55 decibels, which is fantastically quiet. What you also want, and I'm kind of illustrating that, you'll see from the shape of the horizon as we just move through the revs and put on the pace a little bit. We're doing 12 knots now, we've moved up through 5, 6, 7, 8. And all the while, the boat stays flat. There's no hump, there's no bow up attitude. So visibility is very good. And that's in spite of the fact, actually, that we've got some pretty substantial mullions and struts around here, because this is, of course, a flybridge cruiser. So there's a fair bit of weight to hold up. But visibility is good, and it helps that we've been shifted slightly inboard from that port side, just to distance ourselves from the mullions over here. Just opens up the view a bit. And visibility is really good aft as well, and that's particularly the case, as I say, because we don't see a bow up attitude, so you can still see the horizon even when you're underway. Now, one other thing that you definitely need when you're cruising long distance is a big fuel tank, and we got that, 6,000 litres, or a pair of 3,000 litre tanks, one on either side further aft, just to keep the weight where it should be. And in terms of our fuel efficiency, well, that is quite interesting. On a lot of cruising boats, you'll tend to have a favourable cruising band, say between 18 and 28 knots, where you get a similar kind of fuel flow. Well, here it's not that case at all. We've got a kind of linear increase. So if we're right at the top end, which on this particular boat is about 25 knots, 25 and a half knots, well, we're seeing a fuel flow of nearly 15 litres per mile. So if we save 20% in reserve, we're seeing a range of round about 300 nautical miles, maybe 330. If we drop that to 12 knots to their eco speed, well, at that pace we're seeing about 8 litres per nautical mile, so our range increases to about 580, 600 miles. If we drop that again to 9 knots though, well, that's really interesting, because that's when we really get the benefits of that generous fuel flow from this warped hull, which incidentally was designed specifically for IPS drives. We're seeing around about 1,200 nautical miles. And if the sea conditions allow it, as they do today, well, 6 knots is about 1.5 litres per nautical mile. So you increase your range right up to about 3,000 miles. And even for a dedicated cruising boat, that's very good indeed. But it's still a boat, we're still boaters, so we still want to have a play. So let's get her up to pace a little bit and put her through a couple of turns and see how she handles. As I say, the trim is very good indeed. Very settled, very flat. The refinement is very strong too. And at the right kind of pace, the fuel efficiency is not bad at all. What are we doing now? 25 knots. So pretty much the top end. And if we swing her over to the starboard side, well, there's a decent little bit of hill there. And a reasonable arc too. I'd say we're turning 180 in about 3 boat lengths, which is not bad at all. And we're only dropping about 2 or 3 knots, 2 knots in fact, on the way through there. So the torque is quite good, it's quite handy. There's lots of grip, a decent bit of grunt. There's not a great deal of snap or agility to it, but you wouldn't expect that. And if we swing her over to the port side, well, as you'd expect, it's much the same story. Very settled, very relaxed, and you have to say exactly the sort of boat that you could use for a long passage in remarkable comfort. This then, I think, is a very impressive boat from Pardo. I mean, some people will continue to favour the GT75 for its performance, for its looks, for its outdoor spaces and the flexibility of the 2, 3 or 4 cabin layout. But even though there's less flexibility here, well, actually, the standard layout they've chosen works very well. We've got 4 cabins down below, we've got 5 bathrooms, we've got a crew cabin forward. There's no flexibility in terms of layout at the aft end, but actually, even though it's relatively modest in size, that works pretty well too, and it's supplemented, of course, with that big bow space and the flybridge. And as for the wheelhouse, a bigger wheelhouse than we tend to see on Pardos in the past, well, The fact that we got the volume in here and the single level deck, that's great. But the fact that it also opens out at the aft end and on that starboard side in such convincing fashion, well, that's very pleasing indeed. Now, if you've got something to say about the new Pardo Endurance 72, please do leave your comments in the section below. If you've enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and if you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, then please do subscribe to the Motorboat and Yachting channel.